So we're 1 year into a new government, and the single biggest test they're facing is controlling UK migration. It's become a perfect storm of record numbers, massive public pressure, and some pretty radical new policies. Okay, let's get into it. This was the promise, a really clear, tough line drawn in the sand by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The message couldn't have been more direct. Things are gonna be different now. This was the vow to get things back under control. But then there's the reality. In the government's first year in charge, 42,000 people arrived in small boats. Now that's not a decrease, that's a 34% increase. So that gap between the promise and what's actually happening on the ground, well, it's just gotten wider. Okay, so to really get a handle on their new plan, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of the crisis they're dealing with. I mean, what does a system under this much pressure actually look and feel like? Yeah, as you can see, the trend is heading in exactly the wrong direction. Small boat arrivals are surging, getting dangerously close to the record highs we saw back in 2022. The government came in with this big promise to smash the smuggling gangs, but in their first year, the crossings have just picked up speed. And this surge has very real-world consequences. We're talking over 32,000 people living in hotels, a situation that sparked protests in towns all over the country. Politically, the heat is on. A huge 71% of voters think the government is fumbling this issue, which makes that promise to close down all the asylum hotels a very, very high-stakes gamble. So, how is the government actually trying to respond to all this? Well, they've laid out a two-part strategy. Think of it as one part dealing with the here and now, the tactical stuff, and another part that's a much bigger, long-term overhaul of the whole system. So, the first piece of the puzzle is this new deal with France. It's a pilot scheme, this one-in, one-out idea. For every migrant the UK sends back to France, they agree to take one fully vetted asylum seeker from France through a safe, legal route, especially those who already have family here. The whole goal is to break the smuggler's business model. But, it's never that simple, is it? Charities are already gearing up for legal challenges, just like they did with the last government's Rwanda plan. And even if it goes off without a hitch, the numbers are pretty small. We're talking about maybe 50 returns a week. That's just a tiny fraction of the hundreds arriving in that same time frame. Now, the second part of the plan is way more sweeping. It's a big white paper called Restoring Control, and the strategy is crystal clear. Make it harder to get into the UK and harder to stay. We're talking tougher language tests, doubling the time it takes to get settled status to 10 years, big restrictions on work visas, especially in social care, and, pretty controversially, hitting pause on the refugee family reunion route. So that's the plan. But we're a year on from the election now, so what does the data actually tell us? Let's do a little reality check and see how these big policies are stacking up against the government's own promises. Okay, if you look at this scorecard from the Migration Observatory, on the surface you see some wins. Net migration's down 52%, and overseas worker visas are down 60%. But here's the thing. Both of those are mostly because of rule changes the last government made. On their own pledges, no progress on tackling gangs. Remember, small boat arrivals are up. And the asylum backlog? Well, that's a very mixed bag. And here's why it's such a mixed bag. You have to understand that there are really two backlogs. So the government has made a little bit of headway on the initial decisions backlog. That's down 8%. But look at the other side of this. The appeals backlog is just exploding. It's up 53%. So while they're clearing one pile of applications, an even bigger one is growing faster, keeping thousands of people stuck in the system and in those hotels. But this whole story isn't just about policy and spreadsheets and data points. There is a very real, profound human cost to all these delays, and there are some powerful outside forces like the media that are shaping this entire conversation. This quote from Alvina Shamu at the Voices Network, it just really captures the human reality of being stuck in that backlog. It's not just a number. She says it's a very, very crippling state of limbo that can go on for years. And that limbo, it looks like this. Waiting years for a decision, trying to survive on just over £49 a week. Life in a hotel is described not as some kind of luxury, but as re-traumatization in an enclosed space. Imagine living what one person called Groundhog Day, just over and over with absolutely no control over your own life for months or even years on end. And while all this is happening, public perception is being shaped in some really powerful ways. Which brings us to the media's role. New research has found that the huge, intense focus on small boats, which, remember, are only 2% of total immigration, actually makes the public less supportive of all kinds of immigration, even the legal routes for students and skilled workers. Which I think brings us to our final big question. After a year of tough promises and even tougher realities, you have to ask, with a system facing huge legal hurdles, the sheer unpredictability of global crises, and these deeply embedded media narratives, can any government really truly restore control? That seems to be the defining challenge.